The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hand of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in the mountain clefts, in the caves, and in the strongholds. So they were hiding from the Midianites. And whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and other eastern peoples would come and invade the whole country, steal their harvest. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza. And they did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. Help, God! Now, notice anything wrong here. On the one hand, they are doing lots of sinful things, and on the other hand, they are crying to God for help. Ever come across that? People in the world sometimes doing that. Sometimes I've found myself in the same place, to be honest. If I'm really honest, sometimes I've done that. Where you're crying out to the Lord for help, and then really what's going on in your life actually is probably the root of the problem. It's probably God, save me out of this situation. And then it's like actually your choices then is probably put you there. So they cried out to the Lord for help. But isn't God good? He's merciful. He didn't lecture them, but actually he helped them out. Listen to verse 7. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me." And then verse 11, we are now taken to Gideon's home, situation in Gideon's home. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress, hiding to keep it from the Midianites. And then the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, and he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And Gideon's response, "Hey, up. Hey, what? Pardon? What? You're speaking to the right person."
Say what?
Say what? "Pardon me, my Lord?" Gideon replied. And then he turns around to start complaining to the angel. "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?" Forgetting all the sin. "Why are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us to the hand of Midian." And the angel, the Lord himself, turned to him, to Gideon, and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" And Gideon carries on complaining. "Pardon me, my Lord." Gideon replied, "But how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I am a nobody. Are you sure you've picked the right person?" And the Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "Okay, if now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you that is talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." So Gideon rushed inside the house, hurriedly prepared a young goat, killed it, slaughtered it, made a nice barbecue, and then took an ephah of flour, made some bread that without yeast, and then putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to the angel under the oak. And then the angel of the Lord said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And so Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. Poof! When Gideon realized it was really an angel that he was speaking to, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, shalom, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there, and he called it, "The Lord is Peace," the Lord is Shalom. To this day it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That same night, notice the word, that same night, the Lord said to Gideon, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, tear down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height, using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down. Offer the second bull as a burnt offering." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family, his own family, and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. Now, listen to the next bit of drama. In the morning, when the people got up, the people in the town, they got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, and the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this? Who did this?" And when they carefully investigated, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He must die because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar." So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." It was meant to be as a sort of curse. Now, all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the other eastern peoples joined forces, and they crossed over the Jordan and camped at the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also to Asher, to Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet him. to meet them, rather. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." And that is what happened. Gideon rose early next day, and he squeezed the fleece and ran out the dew, a whole bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Please do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me to test the fleece. But this time, make the fleece dry and let the ground around it be covered with dew." And that night, God did so. Only the fleece was dry and all the ground was covered with dew. We'll stop there. So Gideon was really afraid, and he was really tentative. He was like, "I'm not sure I want to do this." And he said to God, "Give me confirmation that this is really you."
It's a bit skeptical.
He was skeptical. Well done, yeah. So he was like, "Let me put this fleece here on the threshing floor. God, if there's lots of dew on it, but it remains dry all around, then I know it's you." And that's what happened. And then that same evening, he was still like, "I'm not so sure about this." And so he said to God again, "God, if this is really, really you, this time, make every bit around you, and make the wool itself wet, but everything around it dry." And God did so. And so we will see how God carried on leading Gideon going forward. So basically, Gideon, this whole passage, there are two things that I want to just bring to our attention. Number one, the Israelites are complaining to God about their enemies, and yet they had an altar to Baal, slap bang in the middle of the town. And they were so fastened to this altar that if somebody dared destroy it, they would want to kill that person.
Nowadays, if that happened, they'll be like, "Oh, it's their religion, don't insult them. I'll insult them."
Very well observed. Very, very well observed, Grace. That's brilliant. That is very clever.
With all due respect, I'll insult them because it's not insulting, it's the truth.
This is true. This is very, very true. You see, you can touch people's altars nowadays, and then they will leap out and go,
You're in jail for the next
"You're touching this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this." And you Christians, it's like a what?
The talk last week that you were saying about.
Oh yes, the dog. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Come back.
So it is very true. You can know when you've touched somebody's idol, or when you've touched the society's idol, or when you've touched the nation's idol by the reaction you get. Sometimes when you touch, it could be even a person, at a personal level. Let's ask ourselves, what is an idol?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love that. Is that a question?
Yeah.
And I was saying we give too much attention to more than God.
Yeah.
So we make them more important than God.
Yes.
It can't be the TV he's talking about if you're watching too much television.
The TV in itself, there's nothing wrong with watching TV.
Yeah.
There's nothing in itself with doing art.
Yeah.
There's nothing actually being passionate about something. God has created us with passions. And sometimes because we have those passions, we'll find we spend a lot of time doing those things. I like music, for example. So we have passions, things that we are really passionate about. Some people it's friends or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with actually being passionate about those things. The problem comes in if that passion means we spend less time with God, or it takes us away from Him. Sometimes we've got to be able to say to God, I would rather be doing this, but actually, would you... I want to just say to you, I want to be available to do what you want me to do. although this is really what I'm really passionate about in this moment, and I really, really want to do this, I'm going to put it down to one side, and I'm going to read my Bible, and I'm going to ask you to just show me what you want me. So we have this thing that actually, it's one of the thing that made Jesus very different to the religious leaders. The religious leaders looked like they were worshipping. They were going afterwards, heavy, big phylacteries and all sorts of garments and things, and they look really, really important. And then Jesus turns up and he's eating and drinking with the wine collectors and with whatever, he's going to parties and things. And so they turn around and say to him, how can you claim to be worshipping God when you're mixing with all these people who are doing all these idolatrous things? So there's nothing wrong with actually maybe going to a football game with people, or doing things like going to the pub. The thing that makes it an idol is when it gets in between you and God.
There's nothing wrong with drinking as long as you're not an alcoholic.
Yes, that's true.
I think as well, it's like what reaction it gets from you when it's taken away.
Yes,
That's wrong.
very important. Yeah, if when that thing is taken away, or even the threat of it being taken away, does it make you sad? It's like your life is completely destroyed. That probably is telling you that that thing has an important place. Give me your mobile phones. You'll be like, oh. This can become an idol. There was a series on television many a year ago, and it was really quite fascinating. And it was about all these girls that went to this convent. It was like a Catholic thing, and the whole purpose for it was they had to get off their mobile phones. They had to basically, and the whole purpose is they were to going there to detox from their mobile phones. So it was really fascinating on this first episode as they turn up to this place and they have to put their phones down. And you know, quite a few of them got really depressed. I mean, they were crying, they were like, they were really, really depressed. And they put the phone down and they walked in, and it was so hard for some of them. They kept wanting to go back and pick it up, and the nuns were like, no, go. That's it. You're saying goodbye to the phone for the week that you're here. And then while they were there, they began to realize that they had a personality without the phone. Because they thought that the phone was their personality.
Yeah.
It was really quite scary. And they began to realize that there were somebody without the phone. One of the girls, I'll never forget, she thought, does that mean I can be me without makeup? And so she got rid of her makeup. And she was like, whoa. And these nuns, they were very, whatever, what they did is just accept them. They just accepted them. They didn't preach to them or anything. They just accepted them, loved them, and just spent time with them. And this girl, at the end of it, she was kind of saying how it went, tears streaming down her face, going, I'm not going to bother wearing makeup anymore. I know that I am me, and I don't have to have my phone, I don't have to do this, I'm just going to be me. So these things, these idols, Satan is very good at putting super glue on them, and then they get stuck to you, and then you find it very hard. So a really good way of knowing what is an idol is if you're asked to put it down.
Can God be our idol?
Oh, very good question. Can God himself become an idol?
Can he be our idol then?
I don't think God himself can't be, but
Interpretations.
for example, worship can be an idol. Religion can be an idol. Serving God can be an idol.
Anything you do.
Where we feel we've got to do things for God.
Anything you look up to could be an idol.
Yes, that's true. If that thing is taken away from you, basically,
We just do worship God.
this is true. This is why sometimes God will allow us in our lives to go through situations where it feels uncomfortable, maybe even pain, where we feel, because sometimes He's wanting to highlight that there's something there that we need to remove. And the reason He wants to remove that thing is because He's thinking of the Midianites who are oppressing us, our real enemies. He's thinking, I want to fight for you, but I cannot fight for you if you've got this thing in your life.
Wrong focus.
Yes. So, number one, we need to ditch the idolatry. I like playing rugby. So kick it into touch. Poof, and hope it never comes back.
Yes, amen. Yes.
Number two is I want you to spot how Gideon had an identity complex.
Yes.
So he grew up with this very clear impression of who he was. And we all do this. When you're growing up, you get up every morning, you look at the mirror, that's Dennis. I recognize that chap. They brush my teeth, go off to work, and you interact with people. All the time you're doing this, you have in your mind, this is who I am, this is who I am. And then God turns up to Gideon. Hey, Gideon! You're a mighty warrior. You're a mighty man of war.
What are you chatting about?
Exactly. And Gideon goes, you look at the mirror, me? Wrong person. You've got the wrong person. This is not who I am. We all do this, by the way. If we are honest, we all do this. We have a very clear, held on to, which actually is, in a way, it's a kind of Bible, that this is who I am. This is who I am. And there are things that have helped us to define ourselves. Anybody can think of anything that would help you to define yourself? That would tell you who you are? Family, yes, true. Family is a really good one. Family tried to define Jesus. Yes. And then when Jesus suddenly started off with his ministry, they were like, we don't recognize this chap. This is not the guy we grew up with. Hey, who's he?
Go be a carpenter.
Can't be, exactly. Family is a good one.
But society also defines us by our color.
Yes.
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 Names and stuff. People
Names, so powerful. Sometimes people can fix. In fact, they called him Jerubbaal. Let him contend with Baal. When they were saying about Gideon, really they were actually cursing him, saying, you dared to destroy the altar. Who do you think you are? Let Baal teach you a lesson. Basically, is what so names, calling names. Anybody remember when you're in school growing up? For those of you that are homeschooled here, you guys are homeschooled. Or when you're playing with friends and stuff like that, and they start calling you names, shorty, or you're this, or whatever, and they're trying to define you, aren't they? They're trying to give you, and sadly, some people, if they're not strong, they end up saying, that's who I am. They take that on board. Any other thing that you can think of gives us, you were saying society and color, so people see you immediately from that background, they immediately think you're that kind of person.
Jobs and stuff.
Jobs. Well done. Yeah, jobs, actually. They see somebody who's that particular job and they think, oh, yeah, I want to be close to that person because they seem really high-flying. And then you say, I'm a cleaner, this is what I do, I clean the loos. And they look at you and they're like,
what's wrong with you?
So, there are things trying to define you. And they do. And sadly, sometimes we take these things on board. Yes.
Isn't God a cleaner of sorts?
Yes.
Yes.
Amen.
He cleans up
Amen.
This is true. Very true. So we have all these things trying to define us. And the thing is, if we are honest, sometimes we allow those things to define us. We allow those labels to stick. And then God turns up because He created us. God knows us more than we know ourselves. And God says to Gideon, hey Gideon, thou man of great valor. And Gideon looks and he thinks, you got the wrong person. God did this with Moses, God did this with Jeremiah, God did this with Isaiah, God did this with all of them. He never picks the wrong person. He knew exactly who Gideon was. God knows who you are. Have you ever asked God to tell you who I am? You might be surprised what He will tell you. There are words. Let me share something with you. This is quite personal. There's a prophecy I received 30 years ago from a young lady, an Australian lady. And I went, you picked the wrong person. And this was like 30 years ago, and one of the things she was saying is, I can see you sort of being involved heavily in sort of pastoring people, and at that time, because of the rejection that I was struggling with, I actually hated people. I actually hated people. There was a fascinating moment. When I was with friends, we were in Canada. I was on holiday in Canada, and I had a couple of close friends that were sort of out in the world and whatever. And we went to parties. We went in a sort of kind of, and I found them so difficult. And then we got back to Ruth's place. I was staying at that time with her parents. And I was like, I found that really hard. I just found that really, really hard. And she was like, why? I hate people. It's just, have you ever had some of those moments sometimes when something comes out of you before you've got the chance to actually catch the words? It's sort of your emotions kind of leave. And then after you say, where did that come from? But because of the rejection and the things that I struggled with, and also the things that are in our family, that was what was going on. And then this lady turns up and gives me a word of prophecy saying, you're going to be involved in pastoral work. You're going to be involved in doing work with people. And I was like,
Thanks.
cannot see this. Just cannot see this. Cannot see this. And I wrestled with God for a number of years about that scripture. There came to a point where God confronted me and said, you have to accept that. Even if you don't believe it with your mind, you've got to begin to accept it because it's who you are. And it's possible for us to, God says something about who you are, and you don't believe it. You reject it. You leave it on the one side. And so when you leave it, it's not going to be realized. You can't actually end up missing who you really are. Ralph said, is there a good way to pray to ask God to show us who we are? And we can do that together. See, God loves simple prayers. And we can just be simple and just direct with Him. And we can say, God, will you show me who I am? We are going to come to communion in a bit. We're going to have a little bit of worship and then have communion. And the thing that I wanted to share with you to do with communion, Jesus died to save the real you. Jesus died to rescue, to redeem, to buy back, that's the word, the real you. Because the world and Satan and everybody, they want to rubbish, they want to trample, they want the real you to be stuck somewhere, shoved somewhere in some corner, so that the real you doesn't really come out. And so the experiences of your life, there'll be all these things that will have happened in your life. What Satan really is doing is he's taking the real you and he's trying to separate you from the real you. Now what Jesus did when He came and He died on the cross is that He went and looked, where is that real Dennis? The Bible says in Luke chapter 19, I have come to seek and to save that which was lost. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. So that person of you that you do not even know that is lost somewhere because you do not know who you are. Jesus is saying, I am on a mission to seek and to save that which was lost. He came specifically for that person, and He died so that He'd have a receipt to tell Satan, I have paid for that real person. Bring him out. Bring him out. I have paid with my own blood for Dennis. I have a receipt in my hand, and it's my wounds, and therefore you have to give it out.
It's like the real birth certificate.
It's the real birth certificate. Hey, Mariah's on form there. The real birth certificate. That is the real one. What were you going to say, Louise? You weren't going to say that. So, I'd like us to stand and to sing a song.